Hi there, and welcome back to the series on creating a Laravel financial website. I'm Dorothy Golden, and in this video we are going to set up our database configuration for our project. So let's get started. Now, in terms of setting up the database configurations, we always make use of the .env file, which is used for setting up environment variable specific settings, and it always has keys for the database configuration. So this section is what we always use for defining the database configuration values for each database configuration key. Now it has a key for the DB connection, and this is a key that we always use for defining the type of database management system that you're going to use. And the database management system is always the software that you're going to use to manage, create, and maintain the database. So I'm going to be working with MySQL, and this is going to be a relational database management software, in that we are going to work with rows and columns to store the data in an organized format. And now we have the DB host. This key is always used to define where the database is going to be hosted, and whenever it is a development environment, we always work with a local host, and this is always the IP address that it uses, and this is IP version 4, so you do not have to make changes on that because it is the default value locally. And then you also have the DB port. So the DB port, currently the value is 3306 because of the fact that I'm working with MySQL, and this is the default port for MySQL. Then you also have the DB database key, and now when it comes to the database, you must pass in the name of the database that has been created in your database management system. Now, more insights on the port. Sometimes the port can vary depending on the default port that you're working with, but most of the times it is 3306, but also sometimes it can be 3307 depending on if you've customized the port settings. And this is always for XAMPP most of the times. Now, when it comes to the DB database key, you always have to pass in the name of the database that has been created in the database management system. And since I'm going to be working with XAMPP, I believe I haven't created any. And now when it comes to the database username, by default, if you're working with XAMPP, it's always root, and then the password is always null or empty. But in case you have customized and assigned, for example, a password and a different username, then you must pass in those values. So with that said, we now have to go ahead and create a new database for our application. So this is PHP-MyAdmin, and we are going to make use of the graphical user interface. So I'm going to access SQL, and you must at least have some knowledge when it comes to working with databases in terms of the sequential query language. So I'm going to first of all create. So you can always create the database by using SQL, or you can also make use of the UI in a way that you click on new, then it creates a new database. So personally, I always prefer working with commands. So I'm going to go ahead and type create database, and then the name of the database is going to be Laravel financial website, and then I can click on go. So this is the database that has been created, and having created the database, you must go ahead and update the value for the database key. So I'll go ahead and paste this, and make sure that when you're creating names for a database, and also maybe sometimes a password, but most commonly the name, you must ensure that it follows the variable naming conversion. So it must at least have, for example, if it's having more than one word, you should not leave space, otherwise your environment file is going to have issues with the space that has been added. So at least if it is having more than one word, you can work with an underscore, or if it is not that format, that naming convention for snake case, you can work with camel naming convention, where each letter, where the first letter starts with a lowercase and all these other letters for new words start with a capital. Or you can also work with Pascal, where each letter for any word starts, where the first letter for every word starts with a capital letter, in that format. So I'm going to work with a snake case, and I'm keeping the database username to root and the password empty because I did not make any configurations on that. So having configured the database successfully, we can now go ahead and test it. And also, whenever you check out the configuration file for the database, so that is database.php config, you can see that by default the database management system that is set is MySQL, but sometimes, depending on the version of Laravel that you're working with, sometimes it is set to MySQL. So you can always confirm that within your database.php config, because currently mine is set to MySQL as the database management system and driver. But we always have different connections, like that other one of SQLite. And in case you're working with Postgres, you also have a driver set up for you this side in terms of the configurations. So you can always make changes depending on the database management software or management system that you're going to work with. So having successfully set all that, we can now go ahead and migrate our default tables. As you can see that we do not have anything done yet on our user interface since we are working with the database. So what we can do is now migrating our default database tables. For any new project, Laravel always provides default migration tables. For example, a table that can be used to create the users, and these are some of the defined attributes of, for example, the users table. And we also have the create password, reset tokens, that is always defined, and we also have create failed jobs and etc. Then also in terms of the personal access tokens that can be used in terms of authentication, we also have the table keeping track of that. So having successfully set up the database configuration, we can now go ahead and create and actually migrate these tables to the database. So in terms of migrating the tables to the database, we still make use of the php artisan command. And in case you're new to the artisan command, you just have to type php artisan, then enter. So php artisan enter will always now give you more insights on the number of commands that are out there in terms of that command. It gives you insights on the available commands that you can work with, and it also first of all ensures that it highlights the Laravel framework that is being used for your current project. So the usage of the command is that the usage is more like the syntax. You type the command, then you follow it up with options and then arguments or flags. So these are the number of options that you can work with. So for example, -v or -- version displays this application is version, quite a number of that. Then in terms of the available commands, we do have, let me check out the main ones. For example, migrate to run the database migrations. Then the common one is also serve to serve the application on the PHP development server. Then in terms of caching, for example, if you want to flash the application cache, you work with cache clear. Then in terms of, for example, displaying information about given database tables. You work with a DB then table and etc. So quite a number of commands. Then in terms of generating the application key, type a PHP artisan key generate, then it goes ahead and sets it up just like we did. Then the main one in terms of migrating, if you want to reset or to roll back all the database migrations, you work with the migrate reset, checking out the status of each migration. We can run a migrate status. So you can always check out those commands just in case you've forgotten or in case you are interested in accessing or learning some other commands. So that is it for that. So I can have this cleared. We can now go ahead and migrate these tables to the database. So PHP artisan migrate is the command that we use. So connection could not be made because the target machine has actively refused. So now we have to so at this point of time I have to debug. First things first, I'll confirm with the port. So the DB port is 3306, and in terms of my XAMPP, I'm having MySQL being hosted on port 3307. So it therefore means that I am going to have this changed to 3307 so that it is in line with the port for MySQL within the XAMPP software. So having updated that, I can now go ahead and clear up this terminal and then running a PHP migrate. So now you can see that the tables have been successfully migrated to the database, and whenever there is a successful migrate operation, it goes ahead and provides insights on what tables have been successfully migrated. So it provides an insight of the info in that it's preparing the database by creating the migration tables, and then it goes ahead and lists all the migration files that have been successfully run. And we have been able to migrate the tables, the password reset tokens, the failed jobs, and personal access tokens. So you always have to go ahead and confirm by refreshing the database. And yes, you can see that these tables have been successfully migrated. So when I check out the tables for the users, these are the fields or the attributes or the columns that have been defined, and this is the table structure. We have a primary key, the name, the email, which is unique, the email verified at, which is a timestamp, the password, etc. And when you scroll down in terms of the cardinality, you can see that we do not have any rows. So the cardinality always shows the total number of rows or records or tuples that have been stored in this table. Now when I check out, for example, password resets, we do not have any yet. Then the password no access tokens that can be used for authentication. Yeah, so this shows that our tables have been successfully migrated into the database. And that is pretty much it in terms of configuring the database and migrating the database. So in case you are working with a different database management system and not MySQL, that means that instead of MySQL, you have to go ahead and, for example, if it is Postgres, you pass in Postgres SQL. Then you of course update the port. Then having done that, you test the migration by migrating the tables and then retesting whether the tables have been successfully migrated. So if I run the status of our migration by typing PHP artisan migrate status, you can now see that provides a status of the tables that have been successfully ran. And if we do type PHP artisan once again, then I check out the migrate section, I can now drop all tables and rerun all the migrations. Then I can also reset and rerun all the migrations. Then I can roll back all database migrations. So let's try to work with, for example, migrate refresh, that is going to drop all tables and rerun all the migrations. So I'll clear this up. So you see it goes ahead and drops all the tables, and then it reruns all the tables. Then we can also reset in that to roll back all the database migrations. So I'm going to clear this up and reset. So PHP artisan migrate reset, then enter. So it rolls back all the migrations. So if I refresh, you can see that all these other tables have been dropped. So that is what that command means. So anyway, we can have our tables migrated back. So I'll type a PHP artisan migrate fresh, and now you see that it dropped and then ensured that it reran all the tables. So when I refresh again, you can see that our tables have been successfully added